We got to replace Corbin Burnes. We'll talk about it next on Fantasy Baseball Today. Welcome to Fantasy Baseball Today Express. I'm Chris Towers. I'm here with Scott White, and we are here to recap this weekend's biggest news. And unfortunately, that means we are here to talk about Corbin Burnes' season-ending elbow injury. He will have Tommy John surgery, and that's a bummer because you drafted him as an ace. There were some bumps in the road, but for the most part, he pitched like an ace and looked like he was turning it around. Now his season's done. We will see him probably next summer. And you've got to replace someone in your starting rotation. And unfortunately, it's not a great time on the waiver wire. So I wrote the waiver wire column on CBSSports.com on Sunday. You can go check it out. And it's all about pitchers to replace Corbin Burnes with, or at least the intro is. And let's rank these three names to start with. Ben Brown of the Cubs, who's 38% rostered. Edward Cabrera of the Marlins, who's 33% rostered, and Nick Martinez of the Reds, he's 53% rostered. How would you rank those three?
I think Ben Brown is a clear number one, because I think he has the most upside. So when it's a group of pitchers that you don't really have any trust in to begin with, like, you might as well shoot for the upside. And I think the way Ben Brown has looked in his last two starts, the 7 innings with 7 strikeouts here against a good Tigers team over the weekend, and just prior to that, Ben Brown had 1 hit over 6 innings, 9 strikeouts against the Reds. So 2 really, really good starts in a row for a pitcher with upside, and your 14% swinging strike rate. I think that's the guy to gamble on. It's not like I'm totally sold on Ben Brown, but I'm ready to chase that upside.
Yeah, and one thing to note with Ben Brown, he appears to be throwing a grip on his changeup, introducing that kick change that everybody's talking about this year. And look, it's not a huge part of his arsenal. He's basically always going to be a 2-star pitcher. But in that start against Detroit, he did throw it a career high 9 times. So that is something to keep an eye on, because it's always been 4-seamer curveball for Ben Brown. The curveball is exceptional. I think it's legitimately one of the best pitches in baseball. The 4-seamer is kind of a problem, though. And so if all the changeup does is make it a little harder to sit fastball and crush that pitch, that's probably a good thing, because it moves. He throws it hard. Like, it could be a good pitch, but because I think the arsenal's been so limited, it's limited the floor, I guess, for Ben Brown. The upside's there. It's just when things go poorly, things tend to go really poorly. And that's also true for Edward Cabrera. We haven't seen the same kind of upside, but I know you don't buy it. But since the start of May, he has a 2.03 ERA, 33 strikeouts to 10 walks in 31 innings. The 10 walks in 31 innings, that's not a great mark for most pitchers. That's an outstanding mark for Edward Cabrera. If he can just have average control, I still think he can be pretty good. We've said this a lot over the last 3 or 4 years.
Trying to make fetch happen, Chris. You got to stop. I know he had been throwing a sinker more instead of the 4-seamer, and 4-seamers held him back for Edward Cabrera. That's been long a topic of discussion. But then he kind of reverted to his old ways here in this most recent start. And I don't think there's much of a plan. And there hasn't been like a dominant start, even though the cumulative ERA has been good during that stretch.
It's been a lot of 5 2/3, 6 strikeouts. Yeah.
Cabrera has more upside than Nick Martinez, but I might just put Nick Martinez second because he feels more usable to me.
All right. What about these three? Michael Soroka of the Nationals. He had a very good start this weekend, 6 shutout innings, 7 strikeouts. Bryce Elder had one of the most surprising starts of the season, 12 strikeouts in 8 innings against the Giants. And Adrian Hauser of the White Sox, he's got a 1.48 ERA and 4 starts since joining the White Sox. How would you rank those three? And do you really have any excitement about any of those three?
Well, you pointed out on the full-length show that Mike Soroka mixed
also throwing a kick change,
a change up more, that used it a lot against lefties, and they've given him trouble this year. So there may be something to that. I think you can afford to see repeated instances of this from Soroka before buying in. I don't think there's a lot of traction for him right now. A lot of attention on him. Elder, there's more attention probably after a start like this, 8 innings, 12 strikeouts. So out of character for him, and I didn't see anything really that was different.
Yeah.
Slider was a little more horizontal, less vertical, but that's the sort of thing where that can just show up one start and never again. I did throw some dollars at Elder in a 15-teamer, but outside of that, I think you can pass.
The only reason I tried to add Bryce Elder in some leagues this week is he gets the Rockies for his next start on the road, not in Colorado. After that, I think that there is, if they juggle their rotation just right, it could be Rockies Marlins over the next 2 weeks. That would be pretty cool for Bryce Elder. If not, it's going to be the Mets, and Phillies are the way the starts after the Rockies one go. So not a lot of interest long-term for Bryce Elder, just a short-term streamer. We are going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back to talk more news from this weekend.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, we are back on FBT Express, and let's talk some more news from this weekend. And unfortunately, Bryce Harper was placed on the 10-day IL with right wrist inflammation. Does not sound like it's going to be a long-term thing, but he won't be available for at least this week. The Phillies did recall Otto Kemp from AAA to take his spot on the roster, and Kemp is somewhat interesting. He's got some speed, some power. He can play a little bit all over the field. He's played a little first, a little second, probably going to play primarily third, but he's also played the outfield, which might be the biggest long-term area of need for the Phillies. He's played about 7 games in left field at AAA. So any interest in Otto Kemp?
Yeah, I think he's interesting. I featured him in the prospects report a couple times this year because basically he did everything right at AAA. 25 years old, but the exit velocities are fantastic. He reportedly plays good defense at the many positions he plays. And so it kind of makes you wonder why Otto Kemp hasn't gotten more prospect attention until this year.
He's a little older. That's probably the
he's older, but he was a year younger last year, and the year before, a year younger than that. So anyway, because he can play anywhere, if he does find his footing quickly for the Phillies, I could see him sticking around.
Yeah, that's Otto Kemp for the Phillies, widely available, name to keep an eye on in the short term. We had another couple of pitchers land on the IL this week. Ryan Weathers didn't land on the IL, but he was hit in the head by a warm-up toss from catcher Nick Fortes before Saturday's start. He's been evaluated for a head injury. He struggled in 3 innings of work. His velocity was down. He shouldn't have been out there at all, I think. And that's one to keep an eye on. We don't know what the next start looks like for him. And then Zebby Matthews was placed on the 15-day IL with a right shoulder strain. He'll probably be out until at least July, if not longer. And Tony Gonsolin placed on the IL with an elbow injury. His UCL is intact, but beyond that, we don't really have any details, no timeline for his return. He's pretty easy to drop. I would try to stash Matthews and hope I don't have to drop Weathers. We talked a lot on the full episode about some pitchers to target. We talked about some at the top of the show. Let's move on to Shea Langoliers, placed on the IL with a strained oblique. That's a tough one. He's been a very good option at catcher this season. So Kyle Teal, probably the top option to try to add if he's available. I think he's about 29% rostered right now, so widely available. Should be rostered in all 2 catcher leagues, Kyle Teal?
Yeah, I would say so. He played every game. I think he's played every game since getting called up. Shallower leagues, though, Agustin Ramirez is still available in a third of CBS Sports leagues. If you play in a 1-catcher league, that would be the choice.
Yeah, he has cooled off. The Marlins are playing all 3 catchers in the same lineup at times. Liam Hicks has actually been really good this year as well, playing first base at times. So that's a name in deeper leagues to keep an eye on. And then Henry Davis, the Pirates' other catchers are all on the IL. He's 6% rostered, still has big power, still really good AAA numbers, and he hit 3 home runs this weekend. That's another name, Henry Davis, to keep an eye on. And then we close it out with quick thoughts on the Braves closer situation. Raisel Iglesias will not be the primary closer for the Braves. Not clear who will be. Pierce Johnson got a couple of chances this weekend, and he blew both of them, including allowing a 2-run walk-off home run on Saturday. They already DFA'd Craig Kimbrell after calling him up.
Nope, not going to be him.
I guess if you have to add someone, it should probably be Pierce Johnson.
Well, like you said, back-to-back, they weren't technically, the first one wasn't a blown save technically, but took 2 losses. It was on the mound for a walk-off win for the Giants. So I think Dylan Lee, the left-hander, is probably right there, particularly since Johnson has faltered twice in a row. And, they might just go back to Iglesias if nobody else is able to nail it down for them.
I would guess in the long run, Raisel Iglesias still leads this team in saves the rest of the way, even if it's not for the next couple of weeks. And that's going to do it for Fantasy Baseball Today Express. We'll see you tomorrow.